today. It's a city of strangers.
There was a barber and his wife, and she was beautiful. A foolish barber and his wife. She was his reason and his life, and she was beautiful, and she was virtuous, and he was naive.
I'm just a Broadway baby, walking off on time feet, pounding 42nd Street to be in a show. Broadway baby, learning how to sing, dance, waiting for that one big chance to be in a show.
Things that he's done. One is content dictates form, one is God is in the details, and the third is less is more. Yes. So what I want to ask each of you is to share with us maybe some other piece of advice that you got when you were working on a role or producing a production or something like that that might be of interest to our audience here today. And why don't we start on this end and go down? So Kurt, if you would start.
Sure. First thing I want to say, he was, as Harvey said, he was one of the most supportive people to have out front or in a rehearsal that I've ever known. Totally into his work, whatever, and but also emotionally very, very supportive. He wanted to hear his lyrics. I remember one time he said, "If you think you loved today, can I hear the loved today? And you're gonna love tomorrow." In terms of advice, the Sondheim tribute almost didn't happen. We had an associate producer who was a writer named Craig Zaden, who's gone on to do many things. But in the beginning, he had envisioned it as a book musical, sort of a murder mystery book musical. And I said, I'm not sure, Craig. And so as the date was approaching, we went over to Steve's house, and Craig laid out his book musical that he'd written, and Steven's jaw dropped. He said, "We are not doing a murder mystery book musical. I'm calling Bert Shevelov. He's coming in from London. He has done this kind of thing before, and if we don't bring him in and call him today, there's going to be no Sondheim tribute." So Craig's nose was out of joint, but he went on to do some, helped us arrange the recording contract with Warner Brothers, because he was doing the book on Sondheim at that point, Sondheim and Company. But that was probably the most intelligent piece of advice and suggestion that Steve ever gave, and because without that suggestion and his knowledge of knowing how these things happen with people flying in on that afternoon, no one's going to be around for 2 weeks to rehearse a murder mystery book musical. It wouldn't have happened. So that bit of advice was well taken.
Okay. Harvey?
I'm not good with this story because I think on Anyone Can Whistle, I was part of the ensemble, and then the one number with Angela. Both of those pieces of music were like your pieces of music. The interrogation of the first act of Anyone Can Whistle was longer than Here to the Street, and it was all yes, you can, no, and we're, and you're number 2, and 4, and 7, 2, and it was so hard to learn. The same with Me in My Town. There was so much harmony in that I think Stephen let it all up to Herb Green, who taught it to us, and there wasn't really time for Stephen to come in and say, let's clean this up a little, because we suddenly opened with this massive sheet of music, The Interrogation, and the same thing happened on Follies. I don't remember him giving us many notes. What happened on Follies was he gave us the song, and then 2 days later Michael staged it, and so we were going, what do we remember, the step or the song or the music or what? And Hal was going, come on in everybody, let's watch this, and we're fighting lyrics and stuff, and you're gonna love tomorrow, and love will see. Oh God. So Stephen pretty much let us alone on those two shows. One time on Anyone Can Whistle, I did have a shouting line, "The lion's loose," and for one night, I don't know what happened to my brain, but I said, "The tiger's loose," and Arthur and Steve laughed, and so like 1 week later, I think I did it on purpose, and it became a sort of a semi-joke. So they weren't all that serious on Anyone Can Whistle, but anyhow, I wish he had given me more personal help.
Well, let's turn to Pam. Some of us have seen him giving her personal help. If any of you have seen the documentary about the cast recording of Company.
Yeah, I was at the theater.
Yeah.
That's right, I just heard that. Yeah, I was singing a wrong note every once in a while, I guess. I was singing an F or an A instead of an F. And he corrected me on that. Some people do it too fast, some people do it too slow, but he and Jonathan Tunick wanted it a very specific tempo, which I've tried to do. So I guess the one on the record is the one we're doing it, because we actually started that like with 14 takes. And I didn't have to sing the whole thing 14 times, because if anybody, even in the clarinet section, or anybody made a mistake, because we're all in the same room, they would stop. Because of course Stephen would be in the booth going, "That's a B flat," to the oboe or somebody. One thing I really admire about Stephen too is that he defers to the director in front of the actors, at least in my experiences with him, because I did the revival of Into the Woods also. And he gave me one note on that character. He said, "She's an Upper East Side lady, the stepmother." And the other note I got from Hal and Stephen on another 100 People was, "The song is about joy." Now, most people would not think that, but that is really the truth. When you really, it's about, how much someone loves living in New York. And that's all they had to tell me. And he writes exactly what he wants you to do, and really appreciates it when you do. And he's very complimentary when you do it the right way. He's been wonderful to me over the years, I have to tell you. Just wonderful. And I attribute my career really to being in Company when I was, because it laid the foundation. First of all, I worked with the best people right off the bat, like Teri. We worked with the best people. It set such a standard that, it was so fortunate that we had those values. And I just think, because of another 100 People, I'm here today. Look how many 40-something years later. And you want to hear about it. So, all the other stuff I've done, great. But hey, if it wasn't for Sondheim, who was, as far as I'm concerned, the only genius I ever met in my life to have any kind of a conversation with, and just, he blows my mind.
Teri, you were in Company. You also were part of the quintet in Night Music, which had to be an interesting experience. I wonder, what sorts of things did Steve talk to you about?
Well, I had this amazing experience. I had done Company, and they were doing a little Night Music, and Hal had originally said to me, "You're my favorite cheerleader, I love you, but I want this to be very European." So he said, "There's really nothing in it for you." And, actually though, before that, this actually happened before. Because Folly had not made them money, they had to do backers auditions to get a record company to sign, to do the recording of Little Night Music. Can you imagine? They had to do backers auditions. And, oh my God, flattering. They asked me to do all of the female songs with Steve doing the male songs. So I got to go to his house and hear the music from A Little Night Music, the first person to ever hear it. And so one night I was over there with Hal Prince, and he was waiting for the song, not your song, but for Carl Magnus' song, and Steve was having trouble writing it. He suffers. He suffers so over his writing. And Steve said, well, I didn't write the song yet. He'd been up all night, mind you. He said, I didn't write the song yet, but I wrote a lyric that I really like. And he sat down and he played You Must Meet My Wife. And he played it, and when he got the cigar but bizarre but you're joking, this big smile. He loved that line, and he had been up all night, doing it. Just a couple of things that I learned from him the hard way by making mistakes. Once I was doing a nightclub, a cabaret show, and Steve came to see me, and I sang Anyone Can Whistle and Losing My Mind. And so I sang 2 wrong lyrics. And those lyrics were, and why this is so important to me is because I teach now, and I use this as an example of the importance of the little words. The big one, the line is, learn to be free, and I said, how to be free. And the other one, in Losing My Mind, spend sleepless nights. I said, spend sleepless nights and think about you. And it's spend sleepless nights to think about you. So at the end of the show, he was great. He's been wonderful to me over the years as well. But the first words out of his mouth, he said, it's learn and to. The other one was, just quickly, when we did the tribute, one of the songs I sang was We're Gonna Be All Right. And there was a syncopation in it. It was a dotted 16th note, I think it was, or something. And I just couldn't get it, and I kept working on it. It was just that little kind of shove. And I just couldn't get it, and it's all I could think about. We did the show, and I did it, and I went to Steve, and I said, did I do it? And just one more quick story, just because I don't know if you all know, this is just showing his brilliance. When we did A Little Night Music, they didn't have the closing to the first act. And Hugh Wheeler had written all of these little scenes. Remember this? He'd written all these little scenes of the different characters. And one day, this came in a little later. We came in, and A Weekend in the Country. This is what Steve managed to tie every little story together. When you listen to that number, A Weekend in the Country, it is so brilliant. And Steve did that from taking these little bits of scenes that Hugh Wheeler had written. Really, really listen to that song and see what he solves in that song.
Sondheim often talks about as much the notion of being a playwright as a composer and a musician. He's really writing material for actors and that sort of thing. The idea of just sitting down and writing a song doesn't really very much appeal to him. So that's great. Len, working on Sweeney Todd, you must have had a lot of feedback from Steve and Hal as that was going on. What can you tell us about that?
Well, funnily enough, not from Steve a lot. He just, he always referred to Harold. And Hal, I think one of the great gifts that Hal has is to cast the right actors. And so he thinks that's, if I do that, if I get that right, everything will take care of itself. And pretty much with Sweeney, that was the deal. But I remember 2 things. We were doing These Are My Friends, when I get the razors, and he had a line in there in the middle of the song, "At last my right arm is complete again." Right. And I said, Steve, Sweeney's left-handed. And he said, what? He said, are you left-handed? I said, no, I'm right-handed. He said, so what the are you talking about? And I said, well, I want him to be left-handed. So can I say at last, my left arm is complete again? He said, no. So I said, so what should I do? He says, drop the right. So at last my arm is complete again. But he wouldn't let me say left. I said, no, you can't say left. And you know, if you think about it rhythmically, it sounds better, my right arm. But the thing that I liked most about, I happen to be, if you remember the first entrance that I had, I came up in the grave right through in the opening of Attend the Tale of Sweeney Todd. And I was down warming up under the stage, and he happened to be down there with me, and I don't know, I think I was doing and he went, out of the dark I hear, oh shit, scared the hell out of me. And he said, what is that? Is that a voice warm-up? I said, yeah, it is. It's an articulation warm-up. And he said, okay, good. But after the first preview, when we were doing the previews, we didn't go out of town, right? So we had all our previews at the Earth Theater. And we had a lot of problems with the pie shop. It had been made out of the wrong materials, and it was impossible to move, and all the actors were moving it around. It was meant to rotate, and so on. And we, in the tech, we never finished the show. Even on the opening, even on the first preview, we had to stop and do it again. So, at any rate, it was a little long at that point, the first preview, but I remember coming off the stage after we didn't lose many people during the preview, or at least it didn't seem like it. But I came backstage and went into and standing outside my dressing room door was Steve, and he said, they understood it. They fucking understood it. And we had a big hug. And that was it.
Good times, bad times, I've seen them all, and my dear, I'm still here. Lush